Today's 30 August 2022. We finished our effort on August. We divided in two parts. We have the accountability at the GSS Euro 2022 traceaugust.blogspot.com. The general idea is there. Some issues kind of are suspended, only for the author or for the groups that are following this. We reported as trial week 14, decisions requested week 02. CDK Moutinho, presented this creditor committee, and legitimate interest against transnational organized crime operating local corruption as observed, offered accountability about efforts made on August 2022, divided in two work groups. Risk Report 2022 traceaugust.blogspot.com, GSS Euro 2022 traceaugust.blogspot.com. We requested the case on antitrust justice as objective and conclusive, just like the other three groups of accusation, as self-defense and protection of creditors committee. What we did after all, we could observe that the mobilization as transnational organized crime is based on the weakness spread all around, including the local corruption. The local corruption in general will be corrupted to protect criminal groups with local action and operations. But in a very specific moment, since the environment, and it doesn't matter which is the environment, has the space opened to international events, those chairs corrupted had a choice as keep the protection and sustain the local criminal interests, or offer their service as a corrupted chair, or an entire workflow as a holder on institutional fail to support the international interest as criminal interest. In general, this goes inside a company, a regular company, it has a name as conflict of interest or self-dealing, and the company will offer you to the trial to be in a court. But inside the criminal groups and the organized crime, as local or international, you probably will not be in a court. The institutional chair corrupted has make decision power, and it's corrupted to use this power for criminal purpose. In general, they do not hold kind of the prospection as future of the criminal organization, but they are all very helpful and useful for the criminal purpose, which can act inside institution but can have the domain of variables that got easily corrupted, serving the interests of organized crime. But when those chairs exposes the organized crime, local or international. In general, they are kind of having not only the conflict of interest, but inside the criminal scams, they kind of are, you know, dripping criminal information or, you know, having the contribution to law enforcement and work groups have the criminal intelligence they need. They are cooperating with the justice, even if they have no idea that this is going on, because they are outlaw. They are beyond the limits of the law, even inside an institution occupying a chair, which can be a board member, a ministry of justice, a minister of economy, a president, a minister of Supreme Court, a judge, whatever. The place you belong, it's not the place that you are, you know, doing the hoax about the professional life you don't have. You are a criminal, but you are a criminal in a situation named conflict of interest. And maybe the criminal organization, local or international, will not offer you to the court, and it doesn't matter if you are a board member, a judge, whatever, because indeed you will drip information based on this conflict of interest. Kind of. You are the gateway and the intersection between local crime and transnational organized crime, because you both do the exploitation of your lack of morality as corruption, taking advantage of this, and after you got caught with the hands in the act, explicit and exposed by your criminal behavior inside a regular area, you will drip information to the local, enforcement, to the international enforcement, and you will take advantage of two criminal groups. And in some way, this kind of information as plea bargain or whatever must be under the evaluation and analysis as a judge with a lot of signatures on it. But the public corruption only goes on public departments. In the same way, the institutional corruption only goes inside the institutions. And this kind of thing can, have a new design as organized crime, globally speaking. And in the same way, allows this new design, you know, to be presented with failures and holographic levels, and the continuity as in 10, which points to a new mafia, remains. And the new mafia having the, domain of circumstance that indeed can project the design of organized crime, not considering, the qualities of groups, but only the behavior as organized crime. You probably must, as organized crime, must consider cut your association with public departments, especially in the areas that you are kind of related with, because indeed we are observing that those areas has internal failure acting by criminal purpose. If you has a criminal motivation as the only thing that motivates you to do things, and the public department is operating by the same motivation you have, it's you know something that we study on management, that this you have the same institutional role, we will have a conflict. And the conflict between the organized crime and the organized crime based on public corruption, of course that will have a huge advantage as public corruption, because they will commit the crime or will select which criminals will have the continuity by the records they do. You know, simple to get. Why why didn't we had any kind of internal control against the public corruption? Because indeed really exists the interest as institutional corruption, especially on public department, be the guideline as new mafia projected in the next 10 years as the unique thing you have. This is a system of exploitation, taking advantage as their position inside a regular institution but misguided by purpose as serving the organized crime in a very specific moment, and then projecting it as the coalition as itself. You know, it means, in other words, that the relation, even with the state, will be changed by the pace things are going. Do not respecting the Constitution, the constitutionalism, the basic rights, the guarantees, and of course that this kind of thing with interaction by public departments under the corruption and in general trying to achieve extra levels as empowerment. Of course that we are talking about the criminal mobilization as state crime based on state failure. And the state failure indeed is something very curious, you know. When you launch after have this explained, the speech about a single and global jurisdiction, especially from United Nations. But how can we have the United Nations divided as nations with no integrity and nations that indeed are having the decreasement as integrity? The idea is quite simple. United Nations, I have one group here. Nations inside the United Nations with decreasement as integrity. It means corrupted nations. See? And in the same way, we have that nations that are kind of losing, are under the corruption process. By international schedules. Even if you are having the cycle as cycling the idea as corruption in nations that has the corruption despite do not allow this goes freely, you know. So, do you have the United Nations by integrity? A. Group 1. By corruption? B. You know, by results from corruption, which implies a structure corrupted, distributed as nation failure or national failure, going at the United Nations. The nations are the nations united by something legal? For instance, do they dismiss, globally speaking, that didn't happen? Or by something illegal, which is keeping the schedule and scams, including the blind eye association, observed non-white collar crime, pandemic events, and others. How goes the legitimacy of United Nations with, headquarters on New York? There are no guarantees beyond the law. Have a good night.